Good afternoon, everyone. I am Dr. Carol Henderson, Vice Provost for Diversity and Inclusion, Chief Diversity Officer, and Advisor to the President. And it is my pleasure to welcome you to the second part of our conversation about For Peace I Rise. Our first conversation was a wonderful one with Chris Davis, who joins me here again, and Reverend Dr. C.T. Vivian's daughter, Denise Morse. So we will, in this conversation, speak to the creative genius behind For Peace I Rise, a wonderful musical that whose reading was staged at Emory University in January of 2020. That seems so long ago, but it was about a year ago. And we thought it would be great for you to see the connection between Emory Theater, our archives, and our community who came together with our office to stand up this very important and wonderful tribute to the legacy of Reverend Dr. C.T. Vivian and his wife, Octavia Vivian. I talk about Black love, but we'll get into that later, because that 58-year marriage was just phenomenal in anchoring the civil rights movement and turning the lens to what we don't often talk about, which is the cost of the movement, but also how Black love undergirds that movement. And so before we get into dialogue, because I can do that, I want to make sure we acknowledge who we have here as our guests. So I'm going to call on each of them to introduce themselves. I'm calling them by their first name because I have a relationship with them. But when you see them, make sure you get permission before you do that. So I'm just going to say that from the beginning. So I will start with Chris.
Hello, Dr. Henderson. Thank you very much for having us on board. My name is Chris Davis. I'm the CEO of For Peace I Rise and executive producer.
Wonderful. Thank you. Renee?
Yes, my name is Renee Clark. I am co-composer and co-music director, and happy to be here. Thank you, Dr.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Rosalind?
Hello, everyone. I'm Rosalind Stae. I'm the managing director for Theater Emory at Emory University. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Tom?
Yes, I'm Thomas W. Jones II, as my mother and father would like to say. I'm director and playwright and lyricist for Peace I Rise.
Thank you, Tom. And I understand how it's important to get all those numbers right, because there is a legacy that goes with that. So I appreciate it.
Yes, I was not going to be a Junie, a Junebug, or a junior. They were very clear that Roman numeral 2. I was like, okay, I get it.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. William?
Yes, I'm William Knowles, and I'm a co-composer and a co-musical director with Renee for Peace I Rise.
Wonderful. Thank you for being here. And last but not least, Dr. Clint.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. My name is Clint Fluker, and I'm the Curator of African American Collections at the Stuart A. Rose Library here at Emory University.
Yes, thank you for being here. And Clint is new to our community. February 8th was his first day. And so we appreciate him being here to give his reflections on that, for how that work, how the archives are so important to this project, but what that portends for us when we think about going forward in collaboration with not only our creative genius, but also our community writ large. And so let's start with Chris. Chris, how did we get here?
Well, we got to Emory. First, I was doing research on Dr. Vivian and trying to consume everything I could consume on him. And it was right after he was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom. And I just started combing the internet to find out, just combing Dr. Vivian and the Presidential Medal of Freedom, looking for photographs. And I happened on an interview that was being conducted at Emory with Randall Beckett and Reverend Dr. C.T. Vivian. And then I decided, let me just go ahead and find out what's going on at Emory. And I started going through your website and looking at your strategic plan, and sort of happened on a conversation that came out of the Provost's office called the One Emory concept. And essentially the way I understand it, it was, sort of, just continuing to encourage collaborations across disciplines on campus kind of thing. And I said to myself, wow, it's interesting. Then I realized that Emory had decided to hire and create a position under the diversity umbrella, and had reached out to the state of Delaware to find someone to hire to bring into that role. And then I called around to the provost's office and I said, this is Dr. Henderson. I mean, can I speak with her? And they said, well, she's not even in Atlanta yet. You have to wait. Well, I said, no, I'm just going to go to LinkedIn and I'm going to find her. So that's what we did. So we basically realized that Emory had the collection, the C.T. Vivian and Octavia Vivian collection. And I knew that was a source that Tom and I could go and immediately begin to work. And that's what we did. We created an account. We would go over and just peruse that awesome collection that you have. And it really gave us a front row seat as to what was going on with the Vivians during that time period. And it was just an awesome display. And then the last piece of that was, it would be great if we could work out a relationship with Theater Emory. And so because I didn't know anyone on campus, I knew that Tom had a relationship with Theater Emory of some degree. And we decided to kind of explore that too, so that would make the relationship with this Dr. Henderson that was coming, make that relationship a little nicer. So that's how we ended up here, and it was to our pleasure. Your office was very gracious. The collection, the Rose Library, was very gracious to us, open arms, and Theater Emory welcomed us with open arms as well.
Yes, I will say persistence pays off. I remember sitting in a hotel answering my LinkedIn inquiry from Chris Davis saying, yes, when I get into Atlanta, we will have this conversation. And I remember the weight of that being new to the position and knowing the honor of knowing a Reverend Dr. C.T. Vivian and the esteem with which Atlanta held him, but indeed the world, and thought, wow, what a gift for me to be able to move this project along. It wasn't whether it was a worthy project. We knew that. We wanted to make sure that we gave it the honor it was due. And so it was a privilege and a pleasure for me to partner with you, Chris, for Peace I Rise, but also to see Emory as a community come together to pay homage to Reverend Dr. C.T. Vivian's life and his wife's life as well, Octavia Vivian, because we do not want to forget her. We understand that's who held down the fort when he was traveling. That's who helped raise children. That's who had her own civil rights agenda as well. And so we want to make sure that when we speak of Reverend Dr. C.T. Vivian, we acknowledge that partnership between he and his wife. So I want to turn to the creative part, which was always so is fascinating for me. So Tom, Renee, and William, tell us how that part happened and how the archives played into that.
Absolutely. Well, I've known Chris for many, many, many decades. And I know it was some years ago that he called and said, Tom, I'm going to do this piece on Dr. C.T., Reverend Dr. C.T. Vivian. And, will you come on board? And I said, absolutely. A couple of years passed before he actually said, he called and said, okay, we're ready to move on it. I said, great. And I want you to consider directing, but also to consider acting in it. And I was like, oh no, no, that ship has passed. That's the kind of heavy lifting I will not do these days. But I would love in any way, shape, or form be a part of the project. And so he set up a series of meetings with Reverend Vivian, and we sat at his house and just kind of sat at the feet of the maestro, of the master, of the architect. Of one of those unsung heroes, very much in terms of the movement of the freedom movement. And from that, I think a collection of impressions began to happen. The initial writer of the project had to bow out for personal reasons. And at that point, I just went to the person and said, hey, let me take a whack at it, see what we can come up with. And knowing that my big mandate was that we had to put a piece of work in front of his eyeballs while he was still here. And in another sense, giving one their roses while they're still living to accept them. And so that was the big charge. And at that point, he was 93, 94. So you're not working with a lot of time, whatever that time may be. So that was the big charge. And with that, then I went to the folks who I've collaborated with over many, many, many years. William Knowles being one and Renee being the other. People who I know not only could write music at really high level, but also write fast. So from the time that we took over, actually the writing and development of the project was about 3 months from the time that and in that 3 months, I remember Chris said, do you want to go to the collection? I said, not yet. I think I want to formulate a story because the collection is so vast and there's so much information. I think if you're not clear as a writer and as an artist what story you're trying to tell, you can kind of get lost and overwhelmed by just the voluminous amount of information that's there and available. Once kind of had a concept of what the story was, knowing that it would be a personal confession of a man, much like us sitting in his house, in his library talking, that needed to be the kind of intimacy that which we had. And so from that, I think we conceptualized the idea. It was a man, a woman, and a love story between a man, a woman, and a movement. From that, I think we then went to the collection, and then that was enormously helpful in filling out all of the kind of details. There's so much in the play. It's very dense. Because there's so much information we got just from the backstory. It's almost like being sitting backstage before a performer goes on and seeing what that process is. That was almost the mechanics and the mechanism of watching the movement. There was so much information about how they prepared a march, what went into it, what the components were, whose job it was, how organized the workshops of nonviolent direct confrontation was, that this was something that you began to realize was not haphazard, it was not emotional or visceral, but this was a really well-defined, conceived freedom movement that had mechanics and architects, etc. So from that, then I think 90 days after that, we were able to put the piece together, put together a draft. Thank God, Emory and all of its partners came on board, which allowed us not only to see it, to see what its merits were and whether in fact it worked, but also to put it in front of Dr. Vivian and his family. And that was perhaps a moment I will take with me to my grave, watching him look up and almost bearing witness to his contribution to his life. And there were moments when he almost got out, when either his grandmother or the actor playing his grandmother or the actor playing his wife, that he almost got up out of the wheelchair and walked into the proceeding. It was really, and I think it was his last public appearance, if I'm not mistaken. But what it did do is not only allow us to know what the merits of the project were, but also to get an endorsement from he and the family that said, yes, this is in fact the story we would like to tell. I throw it over to Will and to Renee to talk about how they came on board in terms of just working the music.
It is, just to add to that before they speak, I mean, you so well captured what that evening was like. And I'm hoping people who had the privilege to be there understand what they witnessed at that moment, at that time, because even when this play is done again, this musical, I keep calling it a play, but it's a musical. Even when this musical is done again, he will be there in spirit, but to know that he was there. And when he stood up to talk and how the entire auditorium leaned in to hear every word he said, because his voice was so soft at that moment, it was just, you're right, it's something I will never forget. It just was, it was transformational. And that's the word I can use. It just was transformational as far as how the archives, through the giftedness of artists such as yourself, Tom, and Renee and William, came together under the leadership of Chris and Rosalind and said, this is what we're going to do. And we're going to give it to the community. And we want you all to respond. I mean, we have people standing, we have folks that love the music, and I want to talk about the music. So I'll ask a question after this, but I want to talk to Renee and William about their process in you know, I'm here leaning in, and of course I'm a date myself. I'm not this old, but I'm just gonna say I'm a date myself. When I think of Stevie Wonder's songs in the key of life, and when you think of music as the soundtrack to your life, how sometimes it stands in those moments. What was your process in joining in the chorus that Tom created in word? How you would do that in music? William, and then Renee.
Okay, sure. So my goal always is to land on your street. You know, we're talking not just music of the 60s, but of his coming of age, which may be more 30s, 40s, you know, things that he would have heard as a kid. And in each moment, we try to land, like I say, on his street and his sound. I taught a million years ago, and I used to talk about music as musical characteristics. What are the characteristics of the music of the 30s, of the 40s, of the 50s? What makes that sound? What kind of propulsion did they have? All those kinds of things are a way of analyzing the music of that period and then landing in that sound. So that's kind of the work that we, both Renee and I, do. And we've been working through the 20th century, not just in this show, but in many of our previous work as well. So it's not a new thing for us. I'm not going to eat it all up. Your turn, Renee.
You're so gracious, William. I think I came into the process. I was the last one invited in. The wonderful thing about working with William Knowles, his vocabulary, his musical vocabulary is so vast and strong and creative. I love music directing, probably more. William loves composing more, and I love being the music director. What the music director will do is will take the piece of music and make sure that the storytelling is closely and tightly a fit with the story itself. And so William would bring the style in, teach the song, and then I would speak with the artist and how is grandmother Vivian singing this song now? It's not just a song. It has to be the grandmother. It has to be Curator. It has to be Sammy Davis. It has to be this character, or else the story stops. The story stops, and then we listen to A and B selection, and then the story starts back again. And we always want to make sure that that does not happen. And to the testimony of that, I was equally as amazed the night of the performance when grandmother was singing. Please help me with the name of the song, Tom or William. I see for you.
Yeah, I see for you what you cannot see, which was actually kind of a mantra that Reverend Vivian's grandmother gave. She was the matriarch and the one who moved the family when they were very young during the Depression. Once the farm went belly up, and once the house, their house on Water Street had burned down, she was the one who said, "We're going to move from where we are, from Missouri, and we're going to go to a smaller community where there's more integrated education." And when asked why, I mean, Reverend Vivian said when we were speaking to him that she was a woman who could see what they could not see. And at that moment, it resonated as almost a song title. When the actress sang it that night, it was interesting because for the first time, Reverend Vivian looked up and almost got out of the wheelchair. So the actress that was actually singing to the actor playing Reverend Vivian said, "Okay, I'll get back to you later," and turned to him. And there was this interesting kind of connection and dialogue that was going on, where she reached out her hand to him and he reached to her. And there was this magical connection of him, in a sense, channeling that youth. Back to you, Renee. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to take your time.
It was the most magical moment, and that was Wendy Fox Williams. She's such a powerhouse, and it was just the scriptures that she started quoting wasn't necessarily in the score, but she went to a space, and we were all like, when that magic happens. That's why I love theater so much, when the magic happens and we're all connected. And there were other moments. When Martin Luther King sang his song, I'm just gonna sit here and say, ooh, ah, ooh, ah. So I But that's our process of getting it to the table. I was invited to, interesting, I wrote the Parchman Farm Blues, which is the story of them being, and I look at Dr. Vivian and I cannot see him on a Parchman farm. I just couldn't see it. And we take these journeys and it takes us so far into a world that's just unbelievable. That's the beauty of theater. And when you're studying and digging it out, it's just absolutely unbelievable. And this piece, I have to say, this piece, one of the reasons I love this piece so much is because so many people are represented. I've never seen a piece like this where the number, I think we have, I'm gonna not tell the truth. I think it's over 30 characters that are.
No, it's actually as Lark, our stage manager, said when she did her scene breakdown, there were 71 characters represented.
Yeah. There we go.
Wow. Wow, that is amazing. And really it's his life, because he was a gift to us for over 90 years. Just think of the decades and the people that he interacted with. And these are folks that are individuals, champions of civil and human rights across a span. And it's just through his eyes, to see the movement through his eyes is really quite phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal.
And I think it's also quite fitting that both he and you know, Congressman John Lewis passed on the same day. Reverend Vivian was his teacher. He was his mentor. He was the one who trained him in Nashville in the movement. And it almost, in terms of, you know, kind of like divine intervention, it was like, I will not leave without, you know. So, you know, Dr. Vivian and, you know, true to the ancestors, you know, John Lewis walked with him, you know, into the arms of the ancestors. And I think that's in a sense fitting in terms of the kind of agreement and the kind of solidarity that they had in a movement that they had to have to endure the tremendous kind of backlash and pushback from a country that said, we don't want to honor our promise, you know, and the legacy of the promise of all men are created equal, all women are created equal, all people are created equal. And then, as Dr. King said, you know, making America honor that promissory note is, in a sense, what bound all of them together. Despite whatever ideological differences they might have had, that they, in a certain sense, wrap themselves in the cloak of humanity and justice. So I think it's only fitting that they went to the ancestors together.
That's powerful. I mean, I think it really brings us, when I think of that love and the fact that Reverend Dr. C.T. Vivian always had this joy in him. No matter what he's seen, you could really see that joy in him, something that no one could take. What I want to ask is, I want to turn to Rosalind to kind of talk about why it was important to stage. We can say it, but I want to talk about the importance of the significance, not only in the One Emory pillars, which talk about faculty eminence, this being a community of choice for undergraduate, graduate scholars, innovation and in creativity, which I see this project taking archives and the gifts of a composer, playwright, and a visionary, and bringing it all together to stage it as a musical, and what it is to have it in a musical form. One of, if not unique, from what Chris was telling me, this is the first time a musical has been done on a civil rights figure, but not just, we want to talk about Hamilton, but we're talking about civil rights figure. And so why Atlanta? Why Rosalind? Thinking about Atlanta, why is it significant?
I think that the work that we do in the theater, we think of it in one way as a responsibility to our students and to the Emory community. Of course, that is always something that we hold high and take that responsibility very seriously. But I think because of Emory and its place in Atlanta, and because this story and the people who embody this story are so central and so important to the civil rights movement, and that Atlanta was so important to that, I think that we had a responsibility at Theater Emory to make sure that our students connected to that they're not just a part of the Emory community, but that we are in turn a part of the Atlanta community. And I think it was important for them to make that connection for themselves, and to see themselves and where they are in the world, and not just as a part of this institution, which is, one of the reasons why we wanted, when we were approached about the project, we said, yes, we'd love to do it. Let's find funding, but we also need to make sure that the students are involved, because it's super important to have them make that connection and see their place.
Yes, not only that connection, and also connect them to the other actors and actresses and individuals who were part of this, because that was the other gift of this, was
Right.
bringing in all of that talent and putting it in the same place, to live this experience, because theater is a way to live the experience, that fourth wall, which I saw disappear on that evening. That
Absolutely.
fourth wall really, or either, maybe I might be speaking out of turn with theater, it either reappeared or disappeared, depending on how you approach that. But it was there, and it was just something, the intimacy of that space, witnessing us to read and to present the life of a trailblazer, with the trailblazer there and family there, and that we were able to honor that, was just absolutely phenomenal.
I agree. And, and that's something that we at Theater Emory hold as one of our values. It's we are a BA program, but we value that relationship with the professionals in Atlanta. And we know that our students can learn so much from them, but it's a mutual give and take in terms of the professionals that we bring in and their relationship to the students, and vice versa. I think that's one of the beauties of what we do, and of this project. Yeah.
Indeed. Thank you, Rosalind. Thank you so much. Did you have anything you want to add? Something? I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So I'm going to ask Clint to talk about the archives and what he thought about this coming together. He's just going to do this from his professional lens, because he wasn't there. He didn't have the privilege of being there that evening. We grieve for him because he wasn't able to experience that. But now, as a curator of the African American collection, and knowing that this is part of that collection, and really an example of how we innovate and create based on lives, I want you to kind of give us your assessment of this. And before you do that, I want everyone else to think of their closing remark. We're coming up, closing remarks. We're coming up on the end of this, to think about what is it that you want people to take away from not only the musical, but the collaboration between community and Emory. And I don't see a difference between Emory's community and the Atlanta community, because we are a part of that. But really, what is it, and you can shape it however you want us to take away from this experience. So Clint, let us, tell us about the archives, what you're thinking, and how this may fit into your vision of what you hope the Rose Library will continue to do. So you can answer that however you want.
Man, no pressure. I got it. No, what I will say, first and foremost, again, thank you for allowing me to be on this panel with everyone. This is really an incredible experience for me. I almost feel like I'm lucky, because I get to just shower praise on everyone who's on this call. I can tell you that, no, I was not there. I was not present. But I did have the opportunity to read the script as well as listen to the music. And I can say that this production attempts and is successful in doing a very difficult thing. It offers personal insight into the life of a giant and his family. It's not just about C.T. Vivian, it's about all the people that are related to him. And Dr. Vivian was an activist, a scholar, an entrepreneur, a religious leader, a son, a father, a husband, a friend, and the moral compass for the country. And I just think that that's kind of an amazing thing to try and put into one evening. but you all accomplish it so well because you not only showcase a respect for the historical document that's found in the CT and Octavia Vivian papers at Rose Library, but you also make room for the spirit of those lives that emanates from those papers. And I can read it on the page and I can hear it in the music. And that's actually the first thing that comes to mind is just like the amazing music that I was able to listen to. My favorite tune is actually Never Too Much Love. I mean, I'm a little bit of a romantic, can't help myself. But the most beautiful scenes that have relationship to the archives that come out for me are early in the play, early in the musical, when a young C.T. Vivian is being led out of the burning home by the voice of his grandmother. And as he makes his way out, the whole house falls behind him. And that imagery is just so powerful that it really just comes off the page and you're taken into it. Similarly, when Octavia and C.T. Vivian meet for the first time, and he offers to escort Octavia on her birthday to just be out and about on February 22nd, I believe. And he's like, a year from now, I'm going to marry you. So I don't forget the anniversary. And she has like a quick quip where she's like, well, you plan everything. Well, that's like an amazing scene because it's funny and, you know, it's the banter, but also he is a planner. He was a strategist. He strategized for the movement as the director of affiliates for SCLC. So, I mean, this is really an amazing scene that kind of speaks to the personality, and you can kind of see where the research comes out, even just in the in these moments, in these scenes, in this way. So it's a great project because it's educational. It tells us about the history, but it also resonates with the soul through these kinds of moments, these life moments that we can relate to. In the interest of time, I'll just close with my point too about the archives. And I'll just say, like the musical that you all put on so beautifully, the role of the archives is really multifaceted. So it's meant to provide resources for scholarly endeavors, of course, but it's also meant to encourage creativity just like this. So in the archives, our staff collaborates and we create exhibitions and art installations, films, documentaries. I think our outreach coordinator just started a podcast where she's interviewing the most important people in Black history and culture out there, Lolita Rowe, doing great work. But now apparently we collaborate on plays too. So this is wonderful. But to me, the goal is always to bring attention to history through the support and creation of more culture. Because projects like For Peace I Rise, they build community around the archives and around the collections. And it's through doing work like this where people can kind of come together and celebrate and learn about this legacy, about the legacy of civil rights. It really opens doors to a discourse, to more learning. So it's like when you learn about Dr. C.T. Vivian, then maybe it'll lead a student to the SCLC papers. Or if you enjoyed the theater, then you can learn about everybody on this call and the work that they're currently doing. And it can also lead you to investigate more about Black theater, about Black musicals. And you can look at the papers around Paul Carter Harrison, for example, look at our papers with Camille Billis and James Hatch, and certainly Jeffrey Holder and Carmen de Lavalade. So I just think that these are opportunities for us to continue to build community. And it really is spawned by the great work that people like you have done. And I'm just grateful that it exists. I wish I could have been there, but I did enjoy a couple tunes and I read it and it was beautiful. So thank you.
Well said. I mean, for someone who wasn't there, you sure acted like you were there. You would have thought you were there the way you and absorbed that. It is so important what you said about that experience and the ways in which this becomes a portal to other discoveries that are important to a movement and Black love and Black self-love. and community, and showing students really what activism looks like in all of its many, its spectrum, because there are different forms of activism, and the ways, and then sometimes just keeping a Black family together is activism in and of itself, particularly when you're having pressures like the FBI sitting outside of your home, or wondering if, about the safety of your husband or your children's father, those kinds of things. And I can't even imagine what Reverend Dr. C.T. Vivian was experiencing as he was watching his colleagues being fallen. I'm thinking of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Medgar Evers, those who are not with us. And so it's something to behold. And this is just the beginning. I'm hoping this conversation will encourage people to tap into those spiritual, creative gifts that you have, to take what people leave, the remnants of their lives, and create this beautiful quilt that is theater, that is musical, that may be poetry, that may be music, but use it so that it can continue to tell the story and reach people in different ways, that there's just not one way to tell that story. And so with that said, I'm gonna call everyone to give me their 30-second or their minute reflection on what you hope this experience, people will take away from this experience, and what it'll encourage them to do in the next iteration of our connection with material artifacts, but just with the lived experiences of others. So Chris, I'll start with you.
Well, I'll take my comments in two directions. One, I just want to thank the Emory family. Obviously, this is not the first time your departments have collaborated, but I'm just glad that you did it again with us. And it was not a simple task. It weighed heavy on me even to approach you, realizing that you hadn't even arrived in the city. And I could not, just forget the fact that, what were Emory's expectations of you as we were asking you to help us. And I really can't thank you enough for having the space to even consider that. I knew what we were up against. And the same thing with Theater Emory. Their season had already started. They had already budgeted their season. They could have very easily said professionally, we love this production. This is the kind of work we support, but this is a bad time for us. So we knew what we were up against. But I just can't thank your staff, the Provost staff, the Theater Emory staff, the Rose Library, their staff, for embracing what we were doing. And I don't get a chance to do this often, but I just want to tell the creative team led by Tom, William Knowles, Renee Clark, how grateful I am to be working with you all. And I've got the sweet job, hanging out with those three and others to be able to do this. And I just wanted to tell those three that from the bottom of my heart that I have the best job in the world, just being able to work with you guys. And I was just so glad you guys decided to come on board, follow Tom, and support what we were doing. And so I just wanted to, tell the Emory family to just continue to support us.
Well, thank you, Chris, for that. I'm humbled by it. Was an honor for us to do that. I know I'm speaking on behalf of Emory. It was an honor for us to do that, but we wouldn't be where we are without your persistence. So let's give credit where credit is due. You got to have a visionary that's gonna say, no, I don't take no for this. No, I'm gonna figure this out. No, we're gonna have to work around this. And so, and with this passion that's contagious. So we appreciate you as well. Tom?
First of all, thank you for that, Chris. That really is touching, and that's my brother from another mother. So yeah. We put in a lot of years together. So it's always good to be in lockstep with someone who you love and know and trust intimately. Particularly how compelling the story is. I want to co-sign what Clint said. Is that I think what archives do. There's something at the end of Hamilton which says, who will tell your story. And it is never lost on me, not only who will tell it, but who will tell it correctly. And what the archives allowed us to do was an insight and a window into telling someone's story, not only from their own point of view, but also with the kind of historical document that becomes necessary, that we tell our stories right. We have suffered over years of cultural appropriation. We've suffered over years of being misrepresented. We've suffered over years of having, who we are and what we are distorted in some way that we can't even recognize ourselves. And so I think what the archiving does is allows us, in a certain sense, to have a warehouse, a storehouse of what is accurate from the lives, from the mouths of those, in fact, who lived it. So I'm eternally grateful that that was there as a resource. I also know, and just in closing, that theater may not change the world, but what it can do at its very best is ask a powerful question. And if it asks a question powerfully enough, we as an audience may be compelled to want to answer it. And in the answering of that question, we then transform our lives. It becomes transformative. And that, in a sense, is how we connect to each other and create a community. As Dr. King said, that we're inextricably bound in a garment of human destiny, and what affects one inadvertently affects us all. So to that extent, I think theater is helpful in assisting that public conversation. And thank you always, Emory family, for being kind of the incubator where this work could happen.
Well, amen to that. I can't say anything to that. I mean, okay. I'm gonna move on to Rosalind. I'm just gonna let that sit. Y'all, I'm gonna let you marinate, just marinate what he said. All right, Rosalind.
Well, following on what Tom said, first of all, I also want to extend my thanks. I think I felt extremely honored and lucky to be a part of this project and to be in that room. And I think that what I would love everyone to take away is just the power of theater and the power that it has to build community. And I think right now, particularly raw about that, because we are in a time when so much theater cannot exist because of the pandemic that we're in. So going back to being in that room, I think that's why it's important for people to remember how important shared experience is and how important community is, whether it's a microcosm or whether it's a larger picture. And I think that's what a story like this can really prove, and also how these collaborations can move us in a way and, as Clint said, really spark people's curiosity and interest. With all of the students that were involved in that project, I would venture at least half of them may have never even heard of C.T. Vivian when they came to this project, and what it can spark and encourage and create, I think is really moving. And I want to always remember that. And I want people to remember how theater can propel that forward.
Indeed, and indeed. And going back to what something that Tom said about the question being asked, what kind of America do we want? The question about, and I can't say it like Tom, so I'm not going to even try. I just remember that question. And I think the question was important because going back to something Rosalind said, the way students may come to this, the question is asked of those who participated in this. What will you do with that information that you have just shared in this experience? How will this transform your life? And theater does that in ways that is so palpable and transcending that it'll just resonate with you for years to come. So agreed. Renee and then William.
Yes, I would like to say on the night of the performance, I sat next to Dr. Vivian. And he leans over and he says, when you get to be this age, all you have are your stories. And I would like to say that when you've lived a life like he lived or like they lived, their stories have life forever. I come, I do 7, 8, 9, 10 shows a year. And when the show is over, the show is over. We walk away and it's done. We have continued to work on this show for a year. And Chris, my heart, you've changed my life in so many different ways just by me watching you and how you do what you do. He said a wonderful thing one day. He said, look, if you're gonna lead, lead. And he is our fearless leader. And I appreciate you so much for that. But we have seen where these stories will not stop in the theater. We've seen so many platforms for museum, for movies, for children books, for children's shows, for Netflix specials, for animation, museums, amusement parks. We've just explored, these stories will not die because they were born in us and given to us, and they're going to be around a long, 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 long time in one way or another. And thank you very much, Emory, for allowing, you know, the incubation period to happen right here on your campus. That's my gift. That's my takeaway.
Thank you so much, Renee. I appreciate that. William?
Of course, I want to thank Emory, particularly the students. It was fun being in the room with them. We pulled exactly no punches. We talked to them like people, and they really put forth a great effort, and it was a fun experience for us as well. Briefly, someone taught me how to set lyrics to music. That was Fred Tillis. And the way he did it was we took poetry, we took Langston Hughes poems, and we set them to music, and it's set me for life. So if the kids are out there and they want to know how to set music to lyrics, grab a great poet like Langston Hughes or Sonia Sanchez and go at it. And it's a great practice. You may not be in the theater today, but you will be there tomorrow. And there it is.
And there it is. And there it is. On that note, I think I could, I won't say drop the mic, but at least we can close.
Drop the mic.
I was gonna say we can definitely close this chapter. I want to thank everyone. I want to thank Chris, S. Renee, Rosalind, Tom, Clint, and William for joining me in this fabulous and inspiring conversation. We hope that you who are listening enjoy this as well. And we hope that you will take something from this, which is we all have gifts and talents. It may not be singing, because you need to know you can carry a note before you sing. It may not be playing an instrument, but you may be able to be part of theater staging, or you may be able to think about costumes, or you may be able to be a researcher in the archives, but think about how you can participate in telling our stories. After coming out of 2020 and the ways we are coming into 2021, we're going to need someone to tell our stories. And I hope that you will be a part of that process. So thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your day.